A shadow moved across the campsite, even though there was no light source to cast it. It slid silently over the ground, stretching from the tree line toward the dying fire, warping as it crossed uneven soil and scattered pine needles. For a moment, it looked like the outline of a person. Shoulders, head, a suggestion of limbs. But then it thinned and dissolved into nothing, leaving the campsite exactly as it had been before. Still, cold, watching. I lowered the flashlight slowly, my grip tight enough to make my fingers ache. The beam trembled against the ground, illuminating the fire pit where embers pulsed weakly beneath a layer of ash. No flames, no moonlight strong enough to reach this far into the trees. The forest canopy above was too dense, swallowing whatever pale light the sky might have offered. There should not have been a shadow. The air smelled damp and metallic, like rain-soaked soil and old leaves. Fog drifted low between the trees, thin strands curling around trunks and slipping across the campsite like something searching. I listened for the usual nighttime sounds, the scrape of insects, the distant hoot of an owl, the whisper of wind through branches. But there was nothing. The silence was total. Behind me, the tent sagged where one of the poles had partially collapsed earlier in the evening. The nylon fabric stirred faintly as the temperature dropped, whispering with each subtle shift of air. It sounded too much like movement for comfort. I resisted the urge to turn around. "Just your eyes playing tricks?" I muttered, though my voice sounded foreign in the stillness. I swept the flashlight toward the trees where the shadow had come from. The beam caught bark textures, wet leaves, tangled roots, but nothing that could explain what I'd seen. No animal, no person, no shape large enough to block light. The beam flickered. I tapped the flashlight, breath catching as it dimmed and brightened again. The battery had been full earlier. I checked. Everything tonight had been checked, double-checked. Remote site, no other campers, no trail traffic. Miles from the nearest road. Another ripple of fog passed through the campsite, thicker this time, blurring the edges of everything it touched. The fire pit looked distorted through it, as if seen through warped glass. For a second, the embers reflected oddly, elongated, smeared, like something was bending the air above them. Then the shadow returned. This time it moved faster. It crossed the collapsed tent first, darkening the fabric as it passed, then slid over my boots, swallowing them in cold darkness that seemed to leach warmth from the air itself. I flinched backward, nearly dropping the flashlight. The beam cut across the ground again. Nothing. My heartbeat felt too loud. Each breath scraped through my chest, visible now in faint white clouds. I became acutely aware of how exposed I was. Alone in a clearing, surrounded by trees that stood too close together, their branches interlocking like ribs. Something shifted near the edge of the campsite. Not a sound, just the sensation of presence like pressure against the skin. The fog parted slightly, revealing the space between two trees, empty, yet undeniably occupied. "Hello," I called, hating myself the moment the word left my mouth. The forest did not answer. The embers in the fire pit dimmed further, their glow retreating inward. As the light died, the darkness around the campsite thickened, becoming less like an absence and more like a substance. Heavy, intent. The shadow appeared again, but this time it didn't move across the ground. It rose. It stretched upward from nothing, climbing the fog, forming an outline that didn't quite match anything human or animal. Its edges wavered, as though struggling to decide on a shape. When it reached its full height, it paused. Watching, I backed toward the tent, the ground crunching softly under my boots. The sound felt obscene, too loud, too revealing. The shadow did not react, but I felt its attention tighten, like a held breath. My flashlight flickered violently now, the beam stuttering in uneven pulses. Each flash revealed the shadow in a slightly different position, closer each time, though I never saw it move. The tent fabric brushed my back. I turned sharply, fumbling with the zipper, hands numb and clumsy. The nylon felt colder than it should have, damp with condensation. I dragged the zipper partway open and ducked inside, dragging my pack with me, heart hammering. Inside the tent, the darkness felt thicker. I shone the flashlight at the thin fabric wall. My own shadow loomed there, distorted and jittering with the flickering beam. For a brief, irrational moment, relief washed over me, until another shadow appeared beside it. Larger. Wrong. It moved independently of my own, stretching and shrinking without any corresponding motion from me. When I lowered the flashlight, my shadow vanished. The other did not. It remained, faint but visible, pressed against the fabric as if something were standing just inches away. I held my breath, every muscle locked, listening for footsteps, for breath, for any confirmation of a physical presence. There was nothing. The tent wall indented slightly, not enough to tear the fabric, just enough to suggest weight. The shadow swelled with it, spreading across the nylon like a stain. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, the shadow was gone. The flashlight beam steadied. The tent wall lay flat. The forest beyond was silent, fog curling lazily past the opening. I waited. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time felt unreliable, stretched thin by fear. Eventually, against my better judgment, I unzipped the tent and stepped back into the campsite. The fire was out completely now. The clearing lay empty, unchanged, peaceful in a way that felt staged. I turned slowly in a full circle, scanning the trees, the ground, the fog. That's when I noticed it. The ground where the shadow had crossed earlier was darker now. Not burned, not wet, but pressed down, as if something had passed over it repeatedly. The shape matched the outline I'd seen rising from the fog, and it led back to the tent. Inside, faint against the inner wall, a shadow shifted slowly, deliberately, even though there was still no light left to cast it. I stood frozen as it moved again, stretching toward me from within the thin fabric, waiting for me to step inside. They found a photograph pinned to a tree showing them sleeping in their tent. It was Eli who noticed it first. He had stepped away from the campsite to relieve himself, boots sinking softly into the dew-soaked earth, when the fog thinned just enough for the shape of white paper to stand out against the dark bark. At first, he thought it was trash, something left behind by careless campers years ago. But the longer he stared, the more the image resolved, sharp and unmistakable. A photograph, pinned to the trunk of a pine with a rusted nail, its edges already curling from moisture. Eli didn't touch it. The forest was silent in that peculiar early morning way, the kind of quiet that came after night animals retreated and before birds dared to return. The fog hung low, clinging to the ground, beating on spiderwebs and tent fabric alike. Everything smelled damp, soil, moss, cold bark. "Mara," he said softly. She emerged from the tent, rubbing sleep from her eyes, wrapped in her jacket. The tent behind her sagged awkwardly, one pole bent from the wind during the night. The fire pit nearby held only a faint warmth, gray ash collapsing inward where embers had burned themselves out hours ago. "What?" she asked. He stepped aside so she could see. The photograph was unmistakably them. Mara felt the blood drain from her face before her mind caught up. The image showed their tent from several feet away, the fabric zipped closed, their silhouettes faintly visible through the thin nylon. She could recognize her own posture, the way she slept curled toward Eli, one hand tucked under her chin. His arm lay across her waist exactly as it had all night. The angle was wrong, too close, too deliberate. "This isn't," she started, then stopped. Her mouth had gone dry. "We would have heard someone." Eli stared at the forest beyond the tree, scanning the fog as if expecting it to part and reveal someone standing there, camera still in hand. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No birds. Even the breeze seemed to have abandoned the clearing. The photograph was printed, not glossy but matte, like it had been developed quickly and cheaply. A faint smudge blurred one corner, as if a damp finger had pressed there while pinning it up. "Take it down," Mara whispered. Eli hesitated. Then carefully he pulled the nail free. The bark made a soft tearing sound as the photograph came loose. He held it between two fingers, as though it might be contaminated. The back was blank. No writing, no timestamp. They stood there for a long moment, fog curling around their ankles, the forest pressing in on all sides. Mara became acutely aware of how exposed the campsite was. The tent, slumped and half-collapsed. The fire, long dead. Their packs scattered where they'd dropped them the night before, careless with the false confidence of solitude. "Someone was here," she said. "Last night." Eli nodded slowly. "Close." They checked the ground around the tree. The soil was soft from moisture, but there were no clear footprints, just disturbed patches, as if someone had been careful or heavy enough to distribute their weight evenly. A few pine needles lay crushed in odd patterns near the tent entrance. Mara swallowed. "The zipper," she said. "What about it?" "I don't remember zipping it from the inside." They both looked at the tent. The flap hung partially open now, the zipper teeth uneven, as if it had been tugged in a hurry. Condensation clung to the fabric, droplets trembling as the fog shifted. Inside, their sleeping bags lay exactly where they'd left them, rumpled with the shapes of their bodies still imprinted. Eli felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What if—" he began, then stopped. "What if what? What if they didn't take just one?" Mara's breath hitched. They searched the campsite more thoroughly after that, moving slowly, deliberately, as though sudden motion might attract attention. Eli circled the perimeter, flashlight in hand despite the growing light. The beam looked weak and out of place in the fog, cutting pale tunnels through the gray. Near the fire pit, Mara found something else. Another photograph. This one lay face down in the dirt, partially stuck to the ground. She peeled it up carefully. It showed the campsite from farther away, taken from the tree line. The tent was centered, the fire glowing faintly. Eli crouched near the pit, his face turned slightly, unaware. "That was before we went to sleep," she whispered. Eli stared at it, then slowly looked toward the trees in the direction the photo must have been taken from. The fog was thicker there, pooled like something alive, obscuring depth and distance. For a moment he thought he saw a shape shift within it, but when he blinked, there was nothing. They didn't speak for a while after that. The forest remained unervingly quiet. No birds, no insects, just the soft drip of dew sliding from branches and the faint rustle of fog brushing past leaves. Mara gathered their things with shaking hands. Every sound felt amplified. The scrape of a zipper, the crinkle of fabric, the dull thud of gear being shoved into packs. She kept glancing toward the trees, expecting the fog to thin just enough to reveal a figure standing there, watching. Eli folded the photographs together, tucking them into his jacket pocket without knowing why. Leaving them behind felt wrong. Taking them felt worse. As they prepared to leave, Mara noticed something else near the tree where the first photograph had been pinned. A small rectangle of lighter bark. Another nail hole. Below it, she felt cold all over. "Eli." He followed her gaze. There was space there. Enough for another photograph. Fresh sap still glistened faintly at the puncture. "Empty." "Maybe they took it with them," Eli said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Or maybe," Mara said slowly, "it hasn't been pinned up yet." They left the campsite quickly after that, packs heavy, steps careful on the slick ground. The fog seemed reluctant to let them go, clinging to their legs, swallowing the path behind them almost immediately. They didn't look back. They didn't see the tree again. And they never knew whether the missing photograph showed them waking up or leaving.